We all have a desire that we want to accomplish in this lifetime. I know I do. And I know that you do as well. And if you don't, chances are you're being labeled as a bum right now, right? For me, I have desires that I would like to accomplish in life. As a seminary student, I would like to see myself graduate one day with a master's degree. That'd be awesome. I'm also in between switching jobs right now. I would like to see myself accomplish a promotion, moving up in the new job and being successful at that. That's a desire that I have. For some of us, it's to one day have a family, own a house, have some kids, and be really well off. That's a desire that we all have, an accomplishment in this lifetime that we would like to achieve. Everybody has something that we want to accomplish. And based off of what our desire is, that is what motivates us through our lives. For example, I want to graduate college. I would like to get that master's degree. So what motivates me is to study, and then that way I can reach that goal. For those of you that want a house or a family, you want to do good at work. That motivates you to get to that desire. You do something to achieve it. The overall question then is, does the end justify the means of getting there? In other words, the things that we do to get to that goal, that desire of ours, is it justified? For example, should our desire for something overshadow the path we take to achieve that goal or that desire? I remember numerous times growing up, I would walk through the store, whether it was Walmart, whether it was Toys R Us or some other store. And as a young child, and even as a teen and a young adult, I would see something that I would want. I would be like, man, I really, really want that. I desire to have it. And then what I would find myself doing is looking at how much money did I have in order to go and buy whatever it is that I wanted. And I would take that money and I would say, I really need to put that money towards this, or I really need to pay this bill or to spend it on this or some other need. But my desire for what it is that I saw overshadowed that. And so I would go and I would spend that money on what it was that I desired, and then I would get it and I would be happy for the moment. And then when that bill came, or when that other pressing matter came, I had no money to do it. I was put in a hole due to the fact that I had spent the money. And what's funny is that's what gets a lot of people into debt nowadays, is that they want to buy something that they don't necessarily have the money for. They have a desire, and the means to obtaining that desire is not justified. The problem is that we desire something so bad that we are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve obtaining that desire. Now, I just mentioned monetary desires, but there's other desires as well. For example, there's power and success in a job, in school, with our coworkers. What are we willing to do to reach that goal? Are we willing to work hard and do what we need to do? Or are we willing to make immoral deals and do some shady transactions? We all want money. Again, are we willing to work hard for it? Are we willing to cheat and steal and just take it? Love and relationships. Here's a big one, especially for young adults and teenagers. We want to be in a relationship with somebody so bad that we are willing to ignore the red flags that pop up. I know for me that happened, and I know for some of you that happens as well. It's common. It's a common thing, but we need to pay attention here. Not all desires are necessarily a bad thing, however, because some of us desire to have a family. Some of us desire to start a job or to start our own business, rather. So some desires are in fact very good. What trips us up, however, is how we go about obtaining that desire. What we do to achieve that goal is what gets us in trouble. And that's what we're going to look at for the next 2 weeks here. Is the means of obtaining that goal, that desire, justified? Now, there's a famous biblical example of someone who wrongfully obtained a desire. Someone who saw something and wanted it so badly that he was willing to give up so much in order to achieve it. And the story is of David and Bathsheba. Now, I know some of you guys are like, oh, yeah, I know, I've heard this story before, and you probably have. But I'm not going to focus on their story necessarily, because everyone that reads their story looks at it and they like to focus on the sexual immorality part or the murder part, which is all legit focuses. But I want to look at a broader picture of desire. I want to look at a bigger theme here. So I'm going to tell you the story of David and Bathsheba, but I'm actually going to refer to the parable that the prophet Nathan comes and tells him. So if you haven't heard the story, it comes from 2 Samuel chapter 11. 2 Samuel chapter 11 is the story of David and Bathsheba, and this is what happens. Israel's army is off fighting a war, and David comes back home during an off season, and he decides, I think I'm going to relax today. So he picks up the local newspaper, goes outside onto his porch with a big tall glass of sweet iced tea, and he sits down, he starts reading his paper and sipping on his tea and just relaxes. Now, while David is out there, he looks out across his kingdom and he sees this woman. She's on the roof of her house, and David looks and he's like, what is she doing? And he realizes, oh my goodness, she's taking a bath. And she's really, really hot. Wow. Yeah. All right, David. So David sees this woman out on the roof, and she's taking a bath, and he sees her, and she's so beautiful, and suddenly he wants her. He wants to be with her. So he tells his other servants, I want you to go out, and I want you to grab that woman. I want you to bring her back here to me. I want to be with her. The problem is that woman was married to one of his top 37 commanders in the army. The man's name, the Bible says, was Uriah. So here it is, David's out on his porch. He looks out, he sees Uriah's wife Bathsheba taking a bath. Now some people ask, okay, what was she doing outside taking a bath in the first place where the king could see her? I don't know. Question for another day. But the point is that David saw her and he desired her. So he had her brought to him, and they did adult things. I'll leave it at that. And Bathsheba ended up getting pregnant. Now David wanted to hide what he had done. So he called Uriah in from the battle, and he said, Uriah, look, man, you've been working really hard. I appreciate everything that you've been doing. Why don't you go home? Be with your wife for a little while. Go ahead. Now, Uriah understood something here, is that when a man and a woman are together in that intimate way, he becomes ceremoniously unclean and cannot go back into battle. Now Uriah, understanding this, he knows that the rest of his soldiers are off in the field and they're fighting and they're dying, and he's like, I can't do this. I can't go and take in the pleasures of life and leave my people behind just so that I can have a night with my wife? No, I don't think so. So he doesn't go home. And David tries and tries. He even gets Uriah drunk. Go home, be with your wife. He's trying to cover up this sin because of his desire. And Uriah refuses. So David finally sends Uriah back to the battlefield with a note that says, put Uriah in the very front of the battle where it is fiercest. Then pull everyone back and let him die. And that's exactly what happens. Uriah goes out into the battle. Everyone's fighting around him. All right, guys, we're doing good. And then slowly the other soldiers pull back, and Uriah finds himself quite literally in the middle of the battle. And there is no one else around him. And so he dies. Now, David, upon hearing this, feigns sadness, but inside he knows that he's gotten away with something. And so he includes Bathsheba into his harem, and there is where she stays, and no one is the wiser about what happened. That's when God sends the prophet Nathan. And this is where we're going to focus on. This is where we're going to start our story here. Nathan comes to David and he confronts him about what it is that he did, because God knows what he did. So Nathan is sent to confront him about it. And we're going to start in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 1. And it says, "And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, 'There were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor.'" Okay, so what this does is it sets up a morality story for David. David was the king. He was always constantly making judgments and settling court cases, basically. So Nathan appeals to that side of David and goes, okay, there was a rich man and there was a poor man. It sounds like a really funny joke, but this is a morality story, David, and you're going to make a judgment call. And I want to see what type of judgment call it is that you make. Rich man and poor man, David. Verse 2. "The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him." So what we have here is just the establishment of these two people. Nothing has happened. Nothing is wrong. It's just establishing these two people. The rich man had many flocks and herds. Obviously, he had been very blessed with material possessions. Nothing wrong with that. The poor man had nothing but a single ewe lamb. And though he possessed little, he too was satisfied. So we see here that nothing is wrong with this picture. We have a rich man and we have a poor man. Each have their own possessions. Each one is happy with their possessions. Nothing wrong yet. Okay? So 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 4. "Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him." Okay, so this is what happens here. And this is where the story starts to have the morality judgment call that David is needing to make here. The rich man reaches a dilemma. Okay? And a desire of the rich man comes out. The visitor comes to him and needs provision. There is a need that needs to be met. The traveler comes to the rich man and needs food, and the rich man has to provide that. So this is the desire. He wants to be a good host. Who wouldn't want to be a good host? A traveler comes to you, or maybe a family member from out of town or a friend from out of town. You haven't seen him in a while. The Bible doesn't really say who this traveler is. It just says that it was a traveler, and he came to the rich man. And the rich man wants to be a good host and feed the man and give him some place to stay and something to drink. But the rich man is unwilling to give of his own wealth. So instead he goes and takes the little lamb of the poor person. He takes the one lamb of the poor guy and butchers it and serves it to the rich man. See, the rich man had a desire. And even though he had all his material possessions, he decided to reach that desire, to pursue that desire with his own power. The rich man had a legitimate need and was unwilling to have that need met in a legitimate way. This is where a lot of people, whether Christian or non-Christian, whoever, this is where a lot of us get tripped up, because we have a lot of desires and a lot of needs, and some of them are legitimate. Not all, but a lot of them are legitimate. And the problem is that when we find that we have these legitimate needs or desires, we are unwilling to let God come in and provide for those needs. We want to do it ourselves. We want to do it with our own power, with our own hands. And this is the definition of temptation. Temptation is having a legitimate need met in an illegitimate way. And then sin comes in, and sin is acting on that temptation to obtain our desire outside of God's provision. And that's what the rich man did. He had a legitimate need. He wanted to be a good host to this traveler. But rather than meet that legitimate need in a legitimate way using his own wealth that he had been blessed with, he goes and takes matters into his own hands and goes to the poor man and takes his little lamb. That's horrible. Absolutely horrible. And at the end of the tale, listen to what David does. We're looking at verse 5 now. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. To die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity." David is outraged at the rich man's behavior. The rich man had a legitimate need or desire, but took matters into his own hands, protecting his own wealth. And David said, "That's not right. That's not right. To meet your need according to your way of meeting it is not right." What is it that we seek to defend by obtaining our desires in our own power or our own strength? What is it that we try to defend? Why is it that we cannot give up our desires and our needs to God and let Him take care of them for us? Are we trying to protect our wealth? Are we trying perhaps to protect our reputation amongst our friends and family? Are we trying to show people that, we are well off in life, that we can take care of this ourselves? What is it that we are trying to defend by obtaining our own desires in our own power and our own strength? So there's 3 questions that I'm going to ask here today, and then there's a 4th one that we're going to look at next week, okay? The 3 questions are this. Number 1, what is our desire? What is it that we want in life? Like I said, I'm wanting to graduate, grad school, get my master's degree. I would like to be successful at my new job. Perhaps buy a house, start a family. Those are desires that I have. What's a desire that you have? I want you to think about that. What is the desire that you have? Question number 2. Am I willing to forfeit something in order to obtain this desire? In other words, am I willing to meet this desire according to my own power, according to my own strength, on my watch, according to my plan for my life? Am I willing to do it selfishly? And then there's the 3rd question, and this one is based off of verses 7 and 8 of 2 Samuel chapter 12. Verses 7 and 8 says, Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if this were too little," listen to what God says here to David, "and if this were too little, I would add to you as much more." So God speaks through Nathan, and Nathan tells David, look, God has given you all this stuff. He's given it to you. And if this still wasn't enough, all you had to do was ask and God would have given you more. Why did you look to serve your own needs and your own desires in your own way? What is it that you were trying to protect, David? What is it that you wanted? When it comes to our desires, our faith plays a monumental role in that it shows just how much we are willing to give up our desires to God and trust His timing and His plans for our lives. When it comes to our desires, are we willing to give them up to God and let Him meet these needs? Or is our faith not strong enough and we want to meet these needs ourselves? Like I said, there's one more question that needs to be asked. But this question, like I said, I'm going to answer next week. And some of you may have already figured out the question because you're already starting to ask it. And then others of you don't quite have the question ready yet, or you're still thinking about it, whichever, that's fine. We're going to look at it next week. But I do encourage you, if you do know the question, I want you to try and look it up yourself. I want you to dig into your Bible, and I want you to try to find God's answer to that question. And if you think you know the answer, great. Hang on to it. We're going to look at it next week. And if you don't know the question or the answer, that's fine. We're going to look at it and we're going to conclude this story here. But the 3 questions that you need to think about this week is, what is my desire? What is it that I want? Am I willing to forfeit something in order to obtain this desire? And then finally, are we willing to trust God to meet our desire? Are we willing to trust God to meet our needs?